definitely, I think it is important to find something to do that not only obviously provides the income that you need, but that does kind of nourish your soul a little bit.
Welcome back to the show. I am Remington Ramsey, and this is Stacey Taylor from Greater Detroit. How are you, Stacey?
I'm great. Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
You are going to do great. I'm excited to hear your story. You are a crazy hard worker. You're probably the hardest worker that I've had on the show this far.
Really?
Yeah,
Oh, wow.
we're gonna talk about what that looks like. Honestly, I like to at the very beginning of the podcast talk about why someone would be interested from a real estate standpoint. And I think your biggest year and claim to fame, at least in terms of just your hustle, was 2021. You did how much?
Just about 34 million and 110 transactions.
But you didn't have an admin.
No.
And you don't have a buyer. It's just you.
It is just me. I was a one-man band at that point.
That's bananas.
We do have an office transaction coordinator, and she's amazing. Like she, sure, behind the scenes is making sure things are moving along, but I do not have my own transaction coordinator.
Yeah, and the thing is, like the Greater Detroit area, I obviously just south of you here in Indy, and I know the home prices. So like, it's not like you're coastal and doing that kind of. I mean, you're hustling 110. I mean, 110 transactions. So yeah, that's just awesome. If we flash back a little bit, your story kind of starts with a nasty divorce, and that kind of brought you into this new world, not only of real estate, but just of life. And so we'll talk about that. And you've also been featured on HGTV. And one of the fascinating things that I want to get into is that you're not very salesy. You don't consider yourself a salesperson. I know some people have said that before, but they are typically selling $30 million of real estate when they say that. So I'm interested to hear how those things go together. But can we start from the beginning, Stacey? I know you really speak on behalf of women in these situations. Can you kind of just tell us what your entrance to real estate looked like post-divorce?
Sure. Yep. So shortly out of college, I decided not to go to law school. And I got my real estate license, but I didn't really know what I would do with it. And a couple of years after that, my then husband and I started a construction company, primarily doing excavation. And the timing just worked out. It was when the construction boom just went, crazy. This is like probably like early 2000s. And so we grew at a really rapid pace. And I never did anything with my real estate license at that point. I used it occasionally, for our own investments or to look up property owners, things like that. But I never really used it. And then right before the recession, I put my license in escrow. And that turned out to not be the time, that I would ever get it back out. So as we were coming in Michigan, really out of that recession, around 2013, 2014, I found myself needing to exit the business that I was part owner in, as well as exit the marriage. And so the unfortunate timing of that was, it was also my daughter's senior year, and she was just accepted to an Ivy League university. And I knew like it was going to 100% be on to take care of my family. I also raised my nephew since he was young. So I needed to stay in my same school district and everything. So I gave myself a year to try real estate. And I still did some book work. I became an employee of the company that I used to be the majority owner of, which was pretty tough. But so for a year, I balanced those two things. And I thought, I'll give real estate 1 year to see if I can make it. And, luckily it was a gamble that paid off. So the first year that I actually sold real estate as a career was 2015.
Wild. So I think what's interesting about real estate, and we're talking about in the last couple shows, just where the market is and the fact that people still need to move when life events happen, deaths, marriages, births, downsizing, age. So those things still occur, which means people still need to make moves during that time. And I think what's fascinating about your story, and probably why so many people gravitate to you, is because you kind of went through that right before you got into real estate. So anyone going through a divorce for whatever reason, probably you could speak that language more so than many.
For sure. And I think, as we kind of just touched on, I don't ever consider myself, a salesperson. I've never had those sales tactics. But, I could speak from the heart of, growing up in a 900 square foot home to, at the age of 30, I built a 6,000 square foot home on an all sports lake in Clarkston. My kids lived, the life of the couple vacations a year, everything. And then, life dealt me another set of cards where I then downsized back to like 1,800 square feet. Everything just was different. And I feel that I can bring some relatability and I understand like the roller coaster of emotions. And I think especially in the beginning, that vulnerability, I would say maybe in that the fact that I don't look at it as being transactional, like I am there to help my clients through the chapters of life that they're going through, whether they're good or bad. And they know that. And I'm looking to be like their trusted advisor forever, not just until this one closes and I, run along to the next client. And so
Sure.
I think that, I was coming from such a damaged and wounded emotional frame at that point. That it just kind of shined through a little bit, and maybe sometimes that was a turnoff for a client here or there, but I think ultimately people felt they could trust me.
What was your initial year, that first year? Did you just crush it immediately? Did you come out the gate running?
No, I think I sold, it's funny, I was actually just looking that up the other day, 2.3 million, and I think it was like 14 transactions.
That's still pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't very good really overall, but that made me realize like, okay, I can do this, this is going to work out. And then my broker at the time, I was at a Coldwell Banker office, and he really encouraged me to take a class called Ninja Selling. And I had never even heard of it, but he knew my backstory, and he knew, that I had came from a very abusive marriage, and I had a lot of baggage. And he recommended I take this class because it was kind of phrased as like a life reboot, basically, and it was like a really intense 4-day class. And I credit that to a lot. Like from 2015 to when I took the class in 2016. I tripled, my business that year after taking that class.
Wow.
Yeah. And
What
really,
about that class? Do you remember anything specifically, like techniques or what?
oh my
What
gosh,
made
yeah.
that?
Like, and it's funny because like when I learned it, when I started kind of learning like the key fundamentals, I laughed and I said, oh my gosh, I was like a ninja before I knew I was a ninja, because that's what they call you when you graduate from that class. And it focuses so much more about building on the relationships with people that you already know versus going out and trying to work a cold lead or buying leads from Zillow or things like that. It really wants you to dig in deep with the people that you already know, in your sphere of influence. And so like to me, that was speaking my language, like I'm not going to go
What
door
was that
knock.
sphere for you at that time? Because I know many people who go through a divorce, like that's part of the problem where, the friends are split. So what was your community at that time?
I was actually really fortunate there because I had been a volunteer in our community for years before that. Our Clarkston has like the one high school kind of thing, everybody, the whole community comes together and supports their sports. And I'd always been really involved with that. I
I
was a
love that.
volunteer cheer coach for years and
That's
then
cool.
ran the whole cheer program. So I had like, and my nephew played football like from second grade on. He played lacrosse. So I was that mom that volunteered for everything. And then I also was a cheer coach as well. So I had this whole network of people that knew me and they trusted their kids with me, so it was a very reasonable step to go ahead and recommend me to, their sister that maybe needed a realtor or something. So I was really fortunate there.
Mm. Well, we've talked a little bit about your entrance, and then it took you a couple years to get it going, and then all of a sudden, bam! After that course, and then your heyday, your 2021 year, and probably dialed it back just for your own sanity after that.
Yeah.
But what I think is interesting is even when we were talking about your real producer's experience, you were featured as a rising star early on, and even in that moment, never even dreamed of being on the cover. Why was that? Why? What did you think? That experience.
It's funny because I remember actually talking to Tara in my office at Coldwell Banker at the time about the magazine and the Rising Star feature. And I just thought that was so cool. And, she explained that the magazine goes out to the top 500 agents in the community. And, and I was like, oh my gosh, do I make that list? And she's like, yes. And so, then I ended up being featured as a Rising Star. And I thought that was just so cool. It wasn't even on my radar that someday I could be on the cover. To me, the cover went to like the big teams, some of the people that have been in real estate for generations, and you recognize those names out there. It wasn't even something that I really thought about. I was really happy with the Rising Star feature.
Yeah.
But I would every month, the magazine would come in, and that was my favorite thing to do, was to read, what did those people do? What was their start? How did they get in the business? What do they credit their success to? And then in 2019, at the same time, I switched brokerages, and that was an accelerant to my career as well. I went to an office of top producers, and with a very competitive nature, and our broker, he really does a lot to kind of foster that competitive spirit. So that was kind of, that poured gasoline, I think, on a fire that, was kind of within me. And then 2020 hit, and, we know what happened, with the market at that point.
Yeah.
It was kind of crazy, but, so 2020 kind of hit, and then, 2021 started rolling around, and I got an email that I was considered for a cover. But, the criteria is pretty tough. You need to have over 20 million in sales, plus like certain units. There was just a lot there. So
yeah,
I filled out the questionnaire, honestly, never thinking that I would hear anything further. And so I was like really shocked and thrilled.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. Chris and Terracioti out there running the Detroit area. They're great.
They're awesome.
And so after the note I have when you talked to Bobby is that you had doubted yourself on everything, and your relationship was abusive. You didn't feel like you were worthy. But what I think is cool is through making the cover of RP, that's it's probably not the only thing, but that's a pretty big validator for you, not only in business but in life at the time.
Oh my, yeah. You nailed it too. Like, you almost can't articulate how much that means when you do hit those goals. And I would say, honestly, that is probably like the biggest career high, that I've ever had. I am been the top agent in our office for the last handful of years, well, since 2020. But the real producers, like that's just so legit. That's not like buying publicity in Our Magazine or something. Like, you have to have the numbers. It doesn't matter. There's no other way to do it. You can't buy the cover. You can't do any. You have to earn it, and it's cut and dry, black and white.
You stole the words right from my mouth. And what I also love about it is it's nomination based. So people are recognizing you. There's a lot of people who do big numbers, but they might nominate themselves, but they're not getting nominated by a lot of people. It might take them a little bit while longer to get on the cover because of that. You're really involved in your community. People are engaged and like you and trust you. And that's just too cool of a story. Really, I know I just met you, but I'm proud of you just hearing all of that.
Thank you.
So, all right, well, let's talk about a fun little episode you did of HGTV. And HGTV, I think, is fascinating because you watch Chip and Joanna Gaines, you watch the Property Brothers. We'll probably at some point have some of these guys on the show.
Fun.
Tell me about your experience. You don't have to tell us the show or anything like that. I just want to know more about, like, what was it like?
Well, and so I can say like a little bit of the details. Like, the show was called Lakefront Bargain Hunt. Okay. And it's the sister show of Beachfront Bargain Hunt that a lot of people know that one. Okay. It's the same production team, same everything. Just not nearly as exciting as the location. Like, our production crew from New York was in Cozumel like the week before they came to Michigan, and so it was so lame, I'm like, yeah, here we are in September in Michigan. It's great, it's 80 one day, 50 the next. But it was really cool. But it was kind of funny because I almost didn't get it because I didn't even return the phone calls or emails because I thought they were scams.
How do they
And
know? How were they reaching? I'm assuming they were calling a couple realtors, but how did they even
they
get your
did.
number?
They reached out to several hundred. I was told later in the
Wow.
area because they wanted to come to Michigan because we're known for all of our lakes. And so they had sent emails from. They basically went through Zillow, and they were just kind of finding agents that seemed to do decent business
Huh.
that they thought might be a good fit. And so they kept inviting you to call in to formally apply, and I thought it was a scam. I wouldn't even click on the link. And so the only
Sounds
reason
familiar for the early days of real producers.
yes, and the only reason I even finally did take the call was my daughter was going to college in New York, and I was driving, and a New York number came up on my phone, so I answered it thinking it was something about her. And
Wow.
I mean, it was the company is called Magilla Entertainment, which is like the parent producer company of HGTV.
Okay.
And it was legit. It was 5 days of filming. We had to clear our schedule. Well, actually, to back it up though, it was like 6 months of interviews. It was first on paper, and I had to nominate some clients that fit the show. So I had 3 sets, and two of them got disqualified like pretty quickly. They just didn't make the cut.
Yeah.
But my one set of clients, we kept making it further and further. And
So at this time, sorry to interrupt, but at this time you are not actually chosen yet. You are still in the interview process, and there's other realtors who have clients that are also trying to make the show.
yes,
Oh
yeah,
wow, okay. So
yeah,
that's
it
a
was
6 month process.
it was crazy. Yeah, it was several. Well, then it was Skype. We didn't really do Zoom.
Yeah.
And it was
So
funny because
this was before 2020.
yes, and I
Okay.
had never even Skyped, and so my
Yeah.
daughter had helped me. Like, she was like, sit up, look at the camera. But my clients were just adorable and very comfortable in front of the camera. They were younger, and like he's actually in digital media, so they were very comfortable
Yeah.
doing that. So I always joke that they carried me through that part. But yeah, we found out like July 3rd that we were being chosen, and we filmed like about a month and a half later.
Well, what's crazy? Okay, so and there's going to be. I know you signed saying
Yeah.
there's certain things you
Yeah.
couldn't talk about, but I'm just thinking about the logistics here. I mean, during that time, houses were selling like hotcakes. So if you're working with your clients for 6 months and you're doing these interviews, are they just on hold before they actually go look for houses so that they can be on the show, or what does that look like?
Well, and actually, one of the clients, they ended up being out of the running because they did find a house, bought it,
Wow.
closed on it, and so like the timing didn't work. They
Okay.
couldn't have closed already like that. And then first I had to make it through several rounds of interviews and cuts. Then it was when the clients kind of came in.
Yeah.
But what was kind of funny was, the clients that I ended up working with on the show, they're not even actually on the lake. The show is Lakefront Bargain Hunt, and they don't live on the lake. It's the creativity that the network does have. We are across the
Sure.
street from the lake, and they have lake privileges and lake access. So
Okay.
that
So
was
they
kind of
showed
interesting.
views that kind of manipulated the house a little bit.
Yeah, and it was 2018 is when it was filmed, so the market wasn't quite as brisk. We were
Right.
you could actually
So you had a little bit of time.
negotiate
Okay.
then.
Yeah. Well, so some of those shows, though, I mean, I think about Fixer Up or any of the shows that have like, hey, here's what the couple's budget is, and here's the house they can buy. You have to factor in the mortgage and the rates and all that. But the ones where they're like, or we could fix up our current house and we can get all of this construction work done for $20. I mean, I just,
I know.
you know what I mean? Like those are rough. I can't wait to have someone on who's actually like the producer of that show to tell me how that whole thing works.
Well, and I will say, like, our numbers and budget, everything was 100% accurate, like on that part. I had to actually give them the MLS information. What was kind of interesting though is some of the houses that we looked at were so far beyond what they were actually looking for. Like, it was important to have like a family style home. Like they ended up buying a 4-bedroom colonial with a finished walkout basement. And again, across the street from a small non-motorized lake. One of the houses that we looked at that the producers chose was like a 2-bedroom cottage on like a massively popular all sports lake in the area. But that was the same price point, that's, I think it was like
Yeah.
360 then or something. But yeah, like you could get like a tiny little cottage that needed complete updating for
So you're saying
360.
the producers of the show threw that in there saying you should look
They
at this
picked,
house?
yes, they chose the other two houses for us.
That's interesting.
Yes.
So at that point, did your clients already choose this is our house and now we got to go out and find a couple fake houses?
No, not 100%. They weren't sold on their house yet, but
Okay.
they threw in they threw
For
in
the
that.
show,
Yeah.
they threw in two others that probably weren't even in
Well,
consideration.
we actually had like a lot more than that, but a couple sold in the meantime,
Okay.
So it was really a
That makes sense.
logistical nightmare. Like I couldn't imagine working on the show trying to coordinate all of that. But
so what was their point in throwing in the 2-bedroom on the big old lake? Was just showing like the contrast of what you can get on a nicer lake, or what were they thinking? Okay.
Yeah, because the actual premise of the show is lake living.
Right.
I'm more on a budget, as they call it. So it was actually kind of neat, and my clients actually were like, "Wow, like this is kind of interesting, to see that." And it kind of put on the radar for them, like maybe we want a cottage one day on the lake.
Yeah. So do you sell a lot of lake property, I'm assuming?
Not as much as you would think from that show. Like, like I wish that would have opened like this massive door for me.
You have some other realtor friends that sell way more on the lake and like, what is going on? Why did I not get the bid?
Probably a little bit. But those definitely are the coveted, listings and clients. But I mean, I do have a couple really, I have had a couple really good sales on the water, but I used to live on an all sports lake.
Yeah.
For a long time too. So I was pretty familiar with like, okay, like this is a good lake for wakeboarding, this, different things
that's
like
cool.
that. But so I mean, I definitely, when I'm meeting with clients, I'm pretty knowledgeable about lakes in the area and different things like that. And then of course, being on that show doesn't hurt, at all.
Sure.
For sure.
Well, I didn't know this was, I mean, I never know what direction our podcast is going to go. But I'm a big lake life guy. I love lake life over the beach. Even we've got a little lake cottage. And what I think is fascinating is like, if you look at Indiana, there's like 100 lakes in this really small area of northern Indiana. The nicest one, or the ones with the nicest properties, is Wawasee. Pretty well known in the Indiana area. And those, to get on the lake now, you're pushing $1 million just to get on the lake now. What was interesting is all the lakes surrounding that are now, their property values are going up, because what's happening is that people don't want to spend the money to get on Wawasee, so they're going to a neighboring lake where you can get on for half that much, but knocking down the little cottages and building up, big McMansions again. And so all the lakes around it, what you're going to see, and I don't know, I think Michigan is actually ahead of Indiana on this front, but do you see that, like how the lakes kind of talk to each other in terms of property value?
Oh, absolutely. And, like you really nailed it too, the desire to get that little cottage and knock it down and build something else, or maybe you buy that in the house next door too, or, things like that, because that's, lakefront property is at such a premium, there's only so much of it. And it will always, I think, remain very coveted. I had a client at the beginning of the pandemic that does a ton of traveling. And they couldn't, because we couldn't do anything. So they had a budget earmarked, for like their 2 upcoming years of like massive world travel. And they called and said, you know what, we'd like to buy a house on a lake instead. We're going to get a cottage. So they bought this adorable little cottage, beautiful sunset views on nice all sports lake, probably 45 minutes from their house. And they loved it. It's perfect. But now they want to add on to it. And ironically, my husband's actually drawing the blueprints for that. They're putting, a big second story addition on, because there's no room the houses are so close. They can only go up. That's the only option.
Sure.
But then they're kind of looking like, okay, we're going to probably sell our longtime family house. And this is where we're going to live our next chapters, is here. But like you said, exactly, there's nothing on the lake that they could really buy that makes any sense financially. So that's the direction they're going.
What was funny during 2020 is when people couldn't world travel and really couldn't even didn't have any desire to plane travel in air travel in the US. they started driving within 1 to 2 hours of their home. And so I had a couple rentals that I had actually just bought right before the pandemic that were
Nice.
on water, and they blew up
Yeah, all
when
that.
people couldn't travel, because like everyone's like, well, I need to get out of here and I want to enjoy the weather, so I guess we'll just go to the lake. And
Yeah,
so that was when our little lake started to skyrocket in property value too, not just because of what was selling, but because what was renting
yeah.
out there. On people started figuring that out, and yeah, I think it's a lot more common now. At least I've seen, just in my own experience, that people are comfortable when they're not, because their lake seasonally, at least in the Midwest, because they only go between 10 and 15 times, they want to make a little bit of their money back, and their Airbnb, their own properties, is becoming more and more common.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yep. I'd love to
The
get one of
Airbnbs,
those.
Airbnb is fascinating because when I was in college, I heard about this concept of Airbnb, and it was literally started off as just like sleeping on people's couches, which I had no desire to do. It was like a bunch of backpacker hippie type thing,
Right.
where like people were just like, "Hey, you can rent out a couch, for $20 a night, or whatever," which is still an option, by the way. People still do. I think the more popular thing is to literally buy a rental for the Airbnb
Mhm.
purchases. Do you represent a lot of clients that are looking to buy investment properties on the lake?
A few that they're so expensive now that it's tough.
Yeah.
I have a lot of clients looking though, like what we call up north in Michigan, which basically up north is anywhere north of where you live. For the most part, like north of Oakland County, and then just north. It all just constitutes up north, and it can be anywhere from the Upper Peninsula to like an hour from your house. And we all just in Michigan, that's considered up north. And I
Yeah.
have a lot of clients that are really actively looking for short-term rental options up north, so to speak. But they're getting harder to get. Like a lot of areas are starting to really enforce rules that you cannot do a short-term rental. Just because neighbors are complaining so much, which I,
Sure.
I don't disagree with that. I think if I
Yeah.
lived somewhere like that full time, or that wasn't my dedicated vacation spot with my family, I don't think I'd want a bunch of partiers there every weekend.
Yeah.
So I do understand that too, but I would love to get a couple myself, to be honest.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens in the next 10 years, because if it's not a problem until it's a problem, right? And
Right.
so you're seeing people even not in HOAs complaining and trying to get either the city or the county to do something about it. So it is fascinating. Like when I'm looking at buying property, I look at the political structure of that state to see if it actually makes sense, because you could get in there and the next thing you know, they're changing the laws and the rules, and you just wasted
Absolutely.
your money there.
Yep.
Well, we're coming to the end, and I wanted to let you share just your thoughts specifically on how you find your true worth and value after a nasty divorce. It doesn't necessarily have to be even after a divorce, just like maybe if you're in a low time period in your life, how you find that true value, like how you personally did that in your personal story, but then what you convey to other people. And I think real estate was actually a really big catalyst for you. Might be something different for other people, but what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, definitely, I think it is important to find something to do that not only obviously provides the income that you need, but that does kind of nourish your soul a little bit. And I was really lucky because I didn't even realize the impact that real estate would end up having for me. But it accomplished all of that. Like so many of my clients are still my friends, to this day. I'm going to their weddings, their children's weddings, things like that. I just helped a wonderful new client of mine that was referred to me from someone I coached their daughter 10 years ago in cheerleading. And her sister went through a divorce, and she said, you have to call Stacey. She will help you. And I really helped her through all the whole process. And I let her know you're going to have that time when you wake up at 2 a.m. and you're in a panic, and you're going to doubt everything you're doing. I was really there for her. I mean, not as her real estate agent, but as her advisor and friend. So for me, that really kind of accomplished both things. But I would say to also make sure that you are finding things that feed all of your soul. And that's kind of what's been lacking for me, and why I have dialed back a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm not working 100 hours a week anymore. I want to get back into volunteering some more. That was always a big outlet for me. And I volunteered a lot with Habitat for Humanity and then also a homeless shelter in the town that I grew up in. And I kind of lost sight of that when I was so busy chasing goals the last couple of years. And I'm trying to get back to that a little bit. But I think it's important to really keep your own true north. If you're not comfortable door knocking, in the real estate industry, if you're not comfortable door knocking, well, Colleen, don't do it. Find the avenue to help you get clients that you are comfortable with, because you need to be genuine and you need to enjoy what you do.
Know your true north. Always make sure you're feeding the soul. Stacey, thanks for being on and sharing your story.
Thank you so much for having me.
Look forward to seeing you at our first national event and meeting you in person.
I can't wait. Thanks again.
All right. This has been the Real Producers Podcast. As always, if we are not in your city and you would like us to be, maybe you can bring the franchise to the city. Check us out on realproducersmag.com.